Welcome to the Feminine Principle podcast, supporting women to let go of the ghosts from their past by exploring the hidden side of their female psyche with shamanic shadow work for women, with your host, Nicola Lucy. Hello ladies, and welcome to this next episode of the Feminine Principle podcast, where today we are opening the individual and collective wound of war. And so wounds, as we know, are painful. And they can run deep. And wounds, they affect us individually and collectively. And so we all have wounds inflicted by others. Wounds from childhood and adulthood when someone hurt us, betrayed us, or even bullied us into submission. Wounds that inflicted physical and or emotional pain that left their visible and invisible scars. And they created a change in our behaviour and belief system in how we related with ourselves and others moving forward. And these are the unconscious patterns that we've created to help us feel safe and secure and stable. Unconscious patterns which have actually cut us off from our true and authentic nature. Patterns which are, as we know, unhealthy and repetitive. And so these wounds, as we know, when left untended, simmer and fester beneath the surface, creating toxins that then seep into every aspect of our lives and create more suffering. They seep into our personal and our professional relationships, affecting our judgment, our ability to trust, our ability to set healthy boundaries, and our ability to relate wholeheartedly. And so to heal these wounds we carry, we will have to open the wound to release the toxins. And this means we will have to feel the pain. And it's actually the pain we don't want to feel, for it is the pain we have been avoiding, suppressing, and denying for most of our lives. Even the thought of opening the wound and facing the pain is too frightening. It's too overwhelming, too discomforting. And so we unconsciously, again, choose to ignore it. Bury it and let it fester some more. Therefore, wounds are powerful, as their presence and impact have shaped our identity and the relationship we have with ourselves and others. They have shaped how we relate, how we behave, and how we believe, and they have the power to heal or destroy individually and collectively. Which then brings us to the wounds of war. War is conflict. War is internal and external conflict. War is what is happening on the inside every time we feel internal conflict within the self. And war is what is happening on the outside of us, in our communities, with each other, and in the world at large, when two or more opposing sides fight for power and control. Therefore, war on the outside always equals war on the inside. And we can see how this war on the inside has been built up over the generations and over the centuries. War which has left so many wounds. And this is what we are now seeing in Ukraine. And this war, like many other wars, is affecting us all on some level, individually and collectively, economically, politically, morally, psychologically, and emotionally. This war is affecting us. And therefore we can see how what is happening in this collective war is therefore impacting us individually on some level, no matter where we are in the world. And the wounds of war run across lands and cultures and generations. We have the war on genocide, civil and human rights, war against the patriarchy, war between gender, race, age, sex, social class, war against politics and religion, war between the East and the West, war for sovereignty, freedom and democracy. And the list goes on. It's such a long list and it can be extremely exhausting. We are all at war at some point in our lives, war within ourselves, at war with each other. And we all have an opinion. We all judge and name and shame and criticise ourselves and others from these wounds of war within. Yet the one thing all war has in common is the long-told story of oppression, to divide and conquer, to gain power and control, to fundamentally create separation so domination can happen. Therefore, we have all been affected by war on some level, consciously and unconsciously for centuries, no matter what age, sex, race, or religion we are. War runs through our blood and our history, and so when another war is initiated and the taking and destruction of lives, sovereignty, and land begins, we all feel it to some extent, because those wars exist in the self. It has the ripple effect that then triggers anxiety, stress, worry on an individual and collective level. We are all fundamentally affected. When we see on the news families being uprooted, displaced and fleeing their homes, leaving behind all they have known, we feel their fear. We feel the oppression and the pain of the separation from their families, their homes, their communities, and their belongings. In being exposed to war in the external, it triggers our own deeply buried fears. Fear for our own safety, security, and stability. Fear for our own families and loved ones. Fear of violence, death, and destruction. Fear of scarcity, of losing our homes, our possessions, our health and wealth, and most of all, our fear of the unknown. All those emotions we've been trying to ignore and deny for so long come bubbling to the surface. And everywhere we go, everywhere we turn, we are faced with them. There is no hiding from our emotional self when war comes to the door. War, even on the other side of the planet, is in our homes, in our communities and classrooms, on our computers and on our phones. And it is these deeper emotional wounds and fears triggered by war that we really don't want to face or feel within the self. As the triggers happen, our own unconscious patterns kick in and our need to control becomes stronger. We need to control ourselves more, control our environment, work more, and go beyond the call of duty because we don't want to face the waging war within, the emotional war that is happening inside the self. We'd prefer to run from it, fight it, or numb ourselves out from it. For me personally, the war in the Ukraine, I first felt anger. My reaction was, why doesn't someone just take Putin down? And in shadow work, this is always the surface level trigger, and it is what is buried beneath that holds the gold. But those words that I said aloud to my partner, why doesn't somebody just take him out, really shook me. They shocked me, these words, because here I was unconsciously wishing somebody to be murdered, wishing unconsciously for somebody to die. And this was really powerful. It was a powerful moment for me. And so I sat with them. I sat with these words and felt into where those words were coming from. And what I uncovered was generations of oppression from a male-orientated society taking away the voices, freedom, and sovereignty of women. As I dug deeper, I could see those moments where women were locked up and classed as insane because they were too outspoken, too independent, too fiery in their passions to bring about a more equal and just society, one that questioned the status quo and the standing of men. I could see how I too have been one of those women, and those women exist along my ancestral lines, and I could see how we were all silenced by fear into conformity. I could feel it all. It was so visceral as I sat with these wounds of war and allowed them to have their voice, to be gagged, and the energy to rise up, to revenge and avenge and exact violence on all those who had wronged us, creating more war within the self, more war within the collective, and therefore more separation internally and externally. And this is what the war in Ukraine triggered in me. And so as you can see, these wounds of war are open. They have been opened by this war in Ukraine, and they are calling for our attention to be seen and acknowledged, healed and integrated. And being exposed to war on some level is giving us this unique opportunity to now bring back into balance what we have carried unconsciously for such a long time. Those aspects of ourselves that have been carrying these wounds of war, do we now ignore them, or do we invite them in? When we give these aspects permission to be felt, we are giving ourselves permission to take responsibility for the damage, the chaos and the separation that has been created as a result, from the point of trauma and the impact the unprocessed trauma has created in our lives and our relationships. We are giving ourselves permission to listen with our hearts and with love to the wounds of war we carry within ourselves and within our bloodlines. We are giving ourselves permission to grieve that which has been too painful to grieve for before. We are giving ourselves permission to feel the oppression, and in doing so we recognize where we have been oppressing the self and others, and where we have been oppressed. And as we go through this process of listening, deep listening, healing, and integrating our own wounds of war, we find a way forward to start to make peace with war, to help and support and change the weave of a deeper understanding and higher perspective from a place of love and not fear. We consciously start to respond to war in the world around us rather than unconsciously reacting. And in doing so, we let go of judgment, naming, shaming, blaming, and instead unlock our own human potential to work together to be more solution-focused and find a more peaceful, heart-centered way to move forward, both individually and collectively. And so, ladies, let me ask you, what is the current war in Ukraine triggering in you? Where do these emotions come from? Where else have you felt them in your life? And what have these deep-seated emotions come to teach you about yourself and war? Are you ready to break free from the ghosts of your past, to live with more freedom and a clear sense of purpose and inner confidence? If so, book a chat with me to explore the potent magic of one-to-one shadow walking sessions at thefeminineprinciple.com.